My stepmom sold my late mom's jewelry and told my dad it was just clutter. So I opened a legal case and found out it was so much worse than I thought. The drawer was empty, not misplaced, not reorganized, gone. Every piece his mother had pressed into his hands 2 weeks before she died, every irreplaceable object she had carried through 50 years of living, vanished from the cedar box like it had never existed. He stood in the bedroom of his childhood home, in a house that no longer looked like his house, and understood in that moment that this wasn't carelessness. This was a choice. What he didn't know yet, what would take weeks of paper trails, depositions, and one devastating text message to uncover, was exactly how far that choice had gone, and what it would cost her. The first thing Ethan Cole noticed when he walked into his childhood bedroom was the silence. Not the comfortable kind of silence that settles over a house on a Sunday morning, the kind that smells like coffee and feels like flannel sheets. This was different. This was the silence of something missing, a hollow, breathless absence that pressed against his chest the moment he stepped through the door. He hadn't been back to the house on Maplewood Drive in 14 months. Not since the funeral. Not since the reception afterward, where Claire had floated through the living room in a black dress that fit her a little too perfectly for someone supposedly consumed by grief, shaking hands and accepting casseroles with a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. Ethan had left that evening with a trash bag full of his own belongings and a promise to himself that he wouldn't return until he was ready. He wasn't sure he was ready now, but his best friend Derek had driven him the 40 minutes from his apartment in Covington, across the Ohio River, parked in the driveway, and said with characteristic bluntness, "You need to do this, today." So here he was. The room smelled faintly of paint. Someone had repainted the walls, a muted grey replacing the warm cream his mother had chosen in 2009. The twin bed where he'd slept through 18 years of childhood was gone, replaced by a sleek daybed with chrome legs and a white duvet. A standing mirror occupied the corner where his bookshelves used to be. It looked like a guest room now. It looked like nothing. He moved through the hallway slowly, his sneakers quiet on the hardwood floor. His father's house, technically. Robert Cole had lived here for 31 years, raised his son here, buried his first wife from here. But in the 2 years since he'd married Claire Whitmore, the house had been systematically transformed into something Robert Cole would never have chosen on his own. The family photos that used to line the staircase wall had been replaced by abstract prints in silver frames. The heavy oak dining table was gone. Even the kitchen, his mother's kitchen, where she had made Sunday pot roast and birthday cakes and late-night grilled cheese sandwiches, had been gutted and renovated into something sterile and magazine-perfect. Ethan had tried to be fair about it. He had told himself again and again that his father was allowed to move on, that grief didn't have an expiration date, but that neither did the right to live. Claire wasn't a monster just because she wasn't his mother. He'd repeated those things like a mantra through the first year of their marriage, through the awkward Thanksgiving dinners and the Christmas morning where Claire had given him a gift card to a clothing store with a note that said "for a fresh start." But then his mother had died, and everything had changed. Margaret Cole had passed 18 months ago after a brief, brutal battle with pancreatic cancer. She and Robert had been divorced for 11 years by then, but Ethan had remained close to her, closer, if he was honest, than he'd ever been to his father. She had been the one who showed up to his college graduation. She had been the one who called every Sunday. She had been the one who pressed a small velvet pouch into his hand 2 weeks before she died and said very quietly, "These are yours when I'm gone. Don't let anyone tell you differently." The pouch had contained her jewelry. Not an extraordinary collection by any standard. His mother had never been a woman of extravagant means, but the pieces were hers. A pearl necklace her own mother had given her on her wedding day. A gold locket with a photograph of baby Ethan inside. A sapphire ring that had belonged to his grandmother. 3 diamond stud earrings of varying sizes. A charm bracelet with 14 charms, each representing a year of Ethan's childhood. A vintage brooch in the shape of a hummingbird, which his mother had worn to every important occasion she could remember. 8 pieces in total, each one a chapter of her life, each one irreplaceable. He had left them here after the funeral, a mistake he would spend months regretting, tucked inside the cedar box on the top shelf of the closet in what used to be his parents' bedroom. He hadn't been in the right state of mind to take them that day. He had assumed they would be safe. He had assumed, naively, that Claire would understand that some things simply were not hers. Now, he stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, looking at the closet. The cedar box was gone. He crossed the room in 4 steps and opened the closet door. Claire's clothes hung in neat rows. Her shoes were arranged on a custom rack. Her handbags occupied the upper shelf where the cedar box had been. He checked the lower shelves. He checked the nightstand drawers. He checked the bathroom cabinet where his mother used to keep her everyday pieces. Nothing. He stood in the center of the bedroom for a long moment, very still, his hands loose at his sides. Then he took out his phone and called Derek. "It's gone," he said when Derek picked up. A pause. "All of it?" "The whole box. Everything." Another pause. Longer this time. "Okay," Derek said. "Come back to the car. Let's think." Ethan took one last look around the room, at the grey walls, at Claire's shoes, at the absence where his mother's things used to be, and felt something shift inside him. Not rage, exactly. Something quieter and more dangerous than rage. Clarity. He walked back downstairs, through the renovated kitchen, past the abstract prints in their silver frames, and out the front door into the pale October sunlight. Derek was leaning against the car with his arms crossed and his red hair catching the wind off the river. He looked at Ethan's face and said nothing for a moment. "She sold them, didn't she?" Derek said. It wasn't a question. Ethan got in the passenger seat and stared through the windshield at the house on Maplewood Drive. "I don't know yet," he said, "but I'm going to find out." The first call Ethan made the following morning was to his father. He had rehearsed the conversation in his head for most of the night, lying on the pull-out couch in Derek's apartment with the ceiling fan turning slow circles above him and the Cincinnati skyline glowing faintly through the window. He had decided on calm, measured. He would ask direct questions and listen carefully to the answers before drawing any conclusions. Robert Cole picked up on the third ring, his voice carrying that slightly distracted quality it had developed in recent years, as if he were always half present in any conversation that didn't involve work or Claire. "Ethan, good to hear from you. Everything all right?" "I was at the house yesterday," Ethan said, a beat of silence. "I know. Claire mentioned it. She was there? She came home while you were leaving, I think. She said she saw your car." Ethan filed that away. "Dad, I went looking for Mom's jewelry. The cedar box. It's not in the closet anymore." The silence this time was longer. When his father spoke again, something in his voice had flattened. "Ethan, do you know where it is?" We should talk about that in person. I'd rather talk about it now." His father exhaled slowly. "Claire went through some of the things in the closet a few months back. She was reorganizing. Some items that weren't being used." "Dad." Ethan's voice was very quiet. "Where is the box?" Another exhale. "I don't know exactly. She handled it. She said she was donating some things, maybe selling a few pieces to a consignment place. I should have paid more attention. I know that." Ethan ended the call. He sat on the edge of the pull-out couch and breathed slowly through his nose, in and out, until the ringing in his ears subsided. Then he opened his laptop and began searching. Derek found him 3 hours later, surrounded by printed documents, handwritten notes, and 2 empty coffee mugs. Ethan had identified 4 consignment and antique jewelry shops within a 15-mile radius of Maplewood Drive that dealt in estate pieces. He had pulled the Ohio Revised Code sections on personal property rights and inheritance. He had found the original email chain from his mother's estate attorney, a man named Gerald Finch, confirming that the jewelry had been listed in Margaret Cole's informal personal property memorandum as items to be transferred to Ethan upon her death. "Is that legally binding?" Derek asked, reading over his shoulder. "In Ohio, a personal property memorandum is valid if it's signed and dated and referenced in the will," Ethan said. "Mom's will references it. The attorney has a copy. The jewelry was mine the moment she died." Derek straightened up. "So Claire sold property that legally belonged to you. That's what I need to prove." He started with the consignment shops. The first 2 were dead ends, polite managers who checked their records and found nothing matching his descriptions. The third shop, a place called Hartwell Estate Jewelers on Montgomery Road, made him stop cold the moment he walked through the door. Behind the glass display case, on a small velvet stand, sat a sapphire ring, his grandmother's ring. He would have recognized it anywhere, the slightly asymmetrical oval cut, the thin gold band with the tiny engraved scrollwork along the edge. His mother had worn it on her right hand for as long as he could remember. He gripped the edge of the display case and made himself breathe. The manager, a trim man in his 60s named Gerald, not the attorney, just an unfortunate coincidence of names, came over with a professional smile. Ethan asked about the ring. Gerald confirmed it had come in approximately 6 weeks ago, part of a small lot of estate jewelry sold by a woman matching Claire's description. He pulled the consignment record. The seller's name was listed as Claire Whitmore Cole. Ethan photographed the record with his phone. Then he asked about the rest of the lot. 3 of the 8 pieces had already been sold. The sapphire ring, the pearl necklace, and 1 pair of diamond studs remained in the shop. Gerald, to his credit, seemed genuinely uncomfortable when Ethan explained the situation quietly and showed him the estate document on his phone. He said he would hold the remaining pieces pending legal clarification and handed Ethan his card. That evening, Ethan called Savannah Brooks. He had gotten her name from Derek, who had used her for a landlord dispute the previous year. Savannah Brooks was 35, sharp-eyed, and had a reputation in Cincinnati's legal community for taking on cases other attorneys found too complicated or too small. She answered on the second ring and listened without interrupting, while Ethan laid out the entire situation. His mother's death, the personal property memorandum, the cedar box, the consignment shop, the 3 pieces already sold. When he finished, there was a brief pause. "You have the estate documents?" she asked. "Yes, the consignment record with her name on it. Photographed and emailed to myself." "And the original memorandum is with the estate attorney?" "Gerald Finch. I have his contact information." Another pause, shorter this time. "Mr. Cole," Savannah said, "I think you have a very strong case. Those items were legally yours at the moment of your mother's death. The sale was unauthorized. We're looking at civil conversion, essentially the legal equivalent of theft of personal property." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "Can I get them back?" "The ones still at the shop, almost certainly. The ones already sold. We can pursue damages equivalent to their value and potentially compel disclosure of the buyers if the shop has records." She paused. "This will also require a difficult conversation with your father." "I know," Ethan said. "Are you prepared for that?" He looked at the printed documents spread across Derek's kitchen table. The legal codes, the estate records, the photograph of his grandmother's ring behind glass. "I've been preparing for it my whole life," he said. Savannah moved quickly. Within 48 hours of their first conversation, she had contacted Gerald Finch, secured certified copies of the personal property memorandum and Margaret Cole's will, and sent a formal legal notice to Hartwell Estate Jewelers, placing the remaining 3 pieces under a preservation hold, pending civil proceedings. She had also sent a certified letter to Claire Whitmore Cole at the Maplewood Drive address, informing her that Ethan Cole was pursuing legal action for civil conversion of personal property valued in excess of $10,000. Ethan knew about the letter because his father called him the morning it arrived. Robert Cole did not sound distracted this time. "What is this?" his father said. The words were careful, but underneath them something was shaking. "It's exactly what it says it is, Dad. Ethan, you can't... This is a family matter. You don't bring lawyers into a family matter. She sold Mom's jewelry." Ethan kept his voice steady. "She sold property that legally belonged to me. The pearl necklace Grandma gave Mom on her wedding day, the locket with my baby picture in it, the charm bracelet, gone because Claire decided to reorganize the closet. She didn't know. She knew whose jewelry it was. She knew Mom had died. She knew I existed." Ethan paused. "Did she ask you before she sold it?" Silence. "Did she, Dad?" A long, fractured pause. "She said she mentioned it." "She mentioned it. And you said what?" "I said I wasn't paying close attention. I was in the middle of a project at work, and she said she was clearing some things out, and I—" His father stopped. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Quieter, more like himself. "I should have asked more questions." "Yes," Ethan said. "You should have." He had expected this conversation to feel like a victory. It didn't. It felt like pressing on a bruise. The following week was the hardest of the process. Savannah had warned him it would be, that the period between filing and response was always the worst, because it was the time when the other side had the opportunity to escalate before calculating their options. Claire escalated. She called Ethan directly on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice so controlled it was almost pleasant. She said that she was sorry if there had been a misunderstanding, but that the jewelry had appeared to be unclaimed property left in the marital home, and that she had simply been making practical decisions about household items. She said she hoped they could resolve this without dragging the family through something painful. She said, and this was the part that made Ethan's jaw tighten, that she was sure his mother would have wanted everyone to move forward. Ethan thanked her for calling and ended the conversation. He relayed it to Savannah, who listened with an expression he was coming to recognize, a slight narrowing of the eyes that meant she was filing information away. "She's laying groundwork for an innocent mistake defense," Savannah said, "which is actually good for us because it means she knows she's exposed." "She mentioned my mother," Ethan said. "People do that when they're uncomfortable," Savannah said, not unkindly. "It's a deflection. Don't engage with it." He tried not to. But that night in Derek's apartment, after Derek had gone to bed and the city had gone quiet, Ethan sat by the window and let himself feel it. The full weight of what had been taken. Not just the objects themselves, though their loss was real and irreplaceable. The locket was gone. The charm bracelet was gone. The hummingbird brooch his mother had worn to his kindergarten graduation, his middle school play, his high school commencement, his college graduation. Gone. What had been taken was a record. Proof that his mother had existed, that she had loved him in specific and particular ways, that there had been a family before Claire and before the renovated kitchen and the grey walls and the abstract prints in silver frames. Someone had reached into that record and erased portions of it for a few $100s at a consignment counter. He didn't sleep well that night. The following Thursday, Savannah called with news that changed the shape of the case. She had obtained the consignment records through a formal document request, and the sale had been more extensive than Ethan had known. Claire had sold not just the 8 pieces from the cedar box, she had also sold 2 framed photographs, family portraits that had been stored in the cedar box beneath the jewelry, and a small handwritten recipe book that had belonged to Ethan's maternal grandmother. Items that had no monetary value and extraordinary personal value. Ethan was quiet for a long time after Savannah told him. "The recipe book," he said finally. "I know," Savannah said. Her voice was gentle. "She sold my grandmother's recipe book." "Yes." He pressed his hand flat against the kitchen counter and stared at nothing. The recipe book had been handwritten in his grandmother's careful cursive, recipes collected over 50 years of Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings and ordinary weeknight meals. His mother had treasured it. She had kept it wrapped in tissue paper. She had made him promise once to learn at least one recipe from it before she was gone. He hadn't gotten the chance. "Can we add it to the claim?" he asked. "Already done," Savannah said. The deposition was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late November in a conference room on the 14th floor of a downtown Cincinnati office building with windows that looked out over the Ohio River. Ethan arrived early, wearing the charcoal jacket Derek had insisted he borrow, and carrying a folder of documents he had organized and reorganized 3 times. Savannah was already there, her own files arranged with the quiet efficiency that had come to reassure him over the past weeks. She looked up when he walked in and gave him a brief nod. "Remember," she said, "today we're here to establish facts. You don't need to argue, persuade, or win anything in this room. Just answer what you're asked and let the record build itself." He nodded. His throat was dry. Claire arrived 12 minutes later with her attorney, a man named Patterson, who had the comfortable confidence of someone accustomed to making problems disappear. Claire herself was composed, dressed in a deep burgundy that Ethan supposed was carefully chosen, her expression calibrated somewhere between concern and mild inconvenience. She didn't look at Ethan when she sat down. Robert Cole was not there. He had told Ethan in a brief and painful phone call the week before that he couldn't attend, that he needed to stay out of it. Ethan had said he understood, and he had meant it. But the empty chair where his father might have sat was something he had to work to stop looking at. Patterson opened by establishing that Claire had been unaware of the personal property memorandum at the time of the sale. This was the foundation of her defense. Ignorance, not malice. She hadn't known the items were legally designated to Ethan. She had believed they were part of the general household contents. It was an unfortunate miscommunication, not an intentional act. Savannah let him build it carefully, piece by piece, and then she began to take it apart. She started with the cedar box itself. Had Claire known the box belonged to Margaret Cole? Claire acknowledged she had. Had she known Margaret Cole was Ethan's mother? Yes. Had she known Margaret Cole had died and left a will? Yes. Had she made any attempt to contact Ethan before disposing of the box's contents? A pause. No. Then Savannah produced the text message. Ethan had not known about the text message until that morning, when Savannah had shown it to him over coffee with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had been sitting on something important. It was a message from Robert Cole to Claire, sent 11 months ago, 4 months before the jewelry was sold. In it, Robert had written, "Ethan asked about Margaret's jewelry box last time he called. He's going to want those things eventually." Claire's response, sent 8 minutes later, "I'll handle it." The conference room was very quiet when Savannah read the exchange into the record. Patterson objected on grounds of relevance. Savannah pointed out with perfect calm that the exchange directly contradicted the claim that Claire had been unaware the items held significance to Ethan, and that it established she had been informed of his interest in them prior to the sale. Patterson's objection was noted and overruled. Claire's composure, Ethan noticed, did not break exactly, but it shifted. Something tightened around her eyes. She answered Savannah's subsequent questions with increasing brevity, her responses growing shorter and more careful. Yes, she had received the text. Yes, she had said she would handle it. No, she had not contacted Ethan. No, she could not explain why she had sold the items approximately 4 months after that exchange. Savannah asked about the recipe book. Claire said she hadn't realized it was a family heirloom. She had thought it was a personal notebook of no particular value. Savannah produced the title page of the recipe book, recovered from the consignment shop's intake photograph, standard procedure for insured items. The title page read, in his grandmother's careful cursive, "For Margaret, with all my love. These recipes are our family." "Mom," Patterson called for a recess. During the break, Ethan stood by the window and looked out at the river. The November sky was the color of old pewter, and a barge moved slowly upstream against the current. He thought about his mother standing at the kitchen counter on Sunday mornings, her reading glasses pushed up on her head, the recipe book open beside the cutting board. He thought about the way she used to hum when she cooked, nothing recognizable. Just a private, shapeless melody that meant she was content. Derek had texted him 3 times during the deposition. "How's it going? You good? Call me after." Ethan typed back, "Almost done. It's going okay." He didn't know if that was true yet, but it felt important to say. When they reconvened, Patterson announced that his client wished to explore the possibility of a settlement. Savannah said she would relay any formal offer to her client. Patterson said they would be in touch. As the room cleared, Claire walked past Ethan without speaking. Then, at the doorway, she stopped. She turned to look at him, really look at him for perhaps the first time that morning, and her expression was something he hadn't expected. Not defiance, not contempt. Something closer to shame. "I didn't think you'd actually do this," she said. Ethan looked at her for a moment. "I know," he said. She left. Patterson followed. The room was quiet again. Savannah came to stand beside him at the window. "Patterson will call by end of week," she said. "They know the text message changes things significantly. What do we ask for?" "Everything we can document," she said. "The 3 pieces still at Hartwell, returned to you immediately. Monetary compensation for the 5 pieces already sold, based on appraised value, and..." She paused. "I'd like to add a request for any documentation from the consignment shop regarding the recipe book. There's a chance it hasn't sold. Estate shops move slowly on items like that." Ethan turned from the window. "You think there's a chance?" "I think it's worth asking," she said. For the first time in weeks, something loosened slightly in his chest. The settlement arrived on a Monday, 9 days after the deposition. Savannah called him at 8 in the morning and read through the terms in her clear, unhurried way. Claire Whitmore Cole agreed to the immediate return of the 3 pieces currently held at Hartwell Estate Jewelers: the sapphire ring, the pearl necklace, and the diamond earrings. She agreed to pay monetary compensation totaling $11,400, representing the appraised value of the 5 pieces that had already been sold, as determined by an independent jewelry appraiser retained by Savannah's office. She agreed to cover Ethan's legal fees in full. And she agreed, this was the part that made Ethan sit down, to provide the contact information for the buyer of the recipe book, which had not yet sold and had been retrieved from the consignment shop's storage following a legal hold request. The recipe book was coming home. "It's a strong settlement," Savannah said. "Everything we asked for, essentially." Why did she agree to all of it? Because the alternative was a civil trial with that text message in evidence, Savannah said simply. "Patterson is good at what he does." He told her to settle. Ethan sat with the phone pressed to his ear for a moment, listening to the sounds of Derek's apartment, the refrigerator hum, a car passing outside, the ordinary texture of a Monday morning. He had been staying with Derek for 6 weeks. He had slept badly for most of them. He had spent evenings reading Ohio property law and mornings organizing documents and long afternoons trying not to think about the charm bracelet with its 14 charms or the locket with his baby photograph inside. Those two pieces were gone for good. The buyers couldn't be traced through the consignment records, cash sales, no documentation. The charm bracelet and the locket existed now only in memory. He had thought, when he learned that it would feel like defeat. Instead, it felt like grief, which was different, heavier in some ways, cleaner in others. Grief was honest. Grief didn't have a verdict. "Thank you," he said to Savannah, "for everything. You did the hard part," she said. "You showed up." He picked up the 3 pieces from Hartwell Estate Jewelers on a Wednesday afternoon. Gerald, the manager, had kept them in a separate case, and he brought them out wrapped in soft cloth with a care that Ethan appreciated. The sapphire ring, the pearl necklace, the diamond earrings. He held each one for a moment before placing them carefully in the velvet pouch he'd brought, the same kind of pouch his mother had used when she'd pressed them into his hands. The recipe book arrived by courier the following Friday, wrapped in brown paper. He sat at Derek's kitchen table and opened it slowly. His grandmother's handwriting was exactly as he remembered. Small and precise, each letter formed with attention. Stuffed pork chops, lemon icebox pie, sweet potato casserole, applesauce cake. Each recipe annotated in his grandmother's hand with small notes. Your grandfather's favorite, and double the vanilla, and Margaret always adds extra cinnamon. On the inside back cover, in different ink, his mother's handwriting, a single edition. "Ethan helped me make this one." He was 6. He ate half the batter. He sat with that for a long time. Derek came home around 6 to find Ethan still at the table, the recipe book open in front of him and the velvet pouch beside it. Derek didn't say anything immediately. He set down his bag, took 2 bottles of beer from the refrigerator, and sat across from Ethan. He set 1 bottle in front of Ethan and looked at the recipe book. "Is that it?" he said. "That's it." Derek picked up his bottle. "You did it, man." Ethan looked at the book, at his mother's handwriting, at the evidence of a 6-year-old boy eating cake batter in a warm kitchen on some ordinary afternoon that had become extraordinary only in retrospect. "Most of it," he said. Derek nodded, understanding the distinction. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the way old friends can, as the evening light shifted over Cincinnati and the river moved on below the city. The following week, Ethan called his father. It was the hardest call of the entire process, harder than confronting Claire, harder than the deposition, harder than the morning he had stood in the empty master bedroom and understood what had been taken. Robert Cole answered on the second ring, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "I got them back," Ethan said. "Most of them." His father was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough in a way that Ethan hadn't heard since the funeral. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I should have—" "I know, Dad. I should have protected those things. I should have paid attention." "Yes," Ethan said. "You should have." He paused. "But I'm not calling to say that." "Then why are you calling?" Ethan thought about the recipe book, about his mother's note, about a 6-year-old eating cake batter, about the way grief worked, not as an ending but as a continuing presence, something you learned to carry differently as time went on. "Because she was your family too," Ethan said. "And I think we both lost more than we were ready to." His father didn't respond immediately. When he did, it was just a single sound, not quite a word, more like something coming loose. "Yeah," Robert Cole said, "we did." They talked for 40 minutes. It wasn't resolution, not the clean, cinematic kind. There were things that would take much longer to repair, and some things that perhaps couldn't be fully repaired. But it was a beginning, and Ethan had learned, in the months since his mother's death, to value beginnings. He placed the velvet pouch on the windowsill of his apartment when he moved back to Covington the following month. Each morning the light came through and caught the sapphire in the ring, scattering small blue reflections across the ceiling. He had learned his grandmother's applesauce cake recipe by December. He brought it to Derek's birthday gathering, and it disappeared in 20 minutes. He kept the recipe book on the kitchen counter, where it belonged. Some things, once lost, can be recovered. Some cannot. The real work, is learning to hold both truths at the same time and to keep moving forward with what remains.